Okay, today I'm going to do just a real brief one, but it's on a very limited subject. But it's an area that I find that people don't sometimes consider when they're assessing the visual data in front of them. So let me thank our Jimmy C. Again, Jimmy, thank you. Jacqueline M. Again, and thank you. Lucas O. You guys are such, and Ben C. You guys are huge, and the fact that you're doing this on an ongoing basis just shows so much. I don't know, trust, confidence, benefit, whatever you're showing, but it really does. It really is appreciated. I love it if more people could consider following your paths. We are still breaking even, as far as the last I've heard from Mr. Producer. Speaking of Mr. Producer, he's going to be out of town over in Europe. Actually, I think he's going to be in somewhere around where Rembrandt's town, over in Leiden, maybe in the Netherlands. And so we have to do this kind of kind of quickly, and I need to get it sent off to him, and all that's a bunch of work, and he's trying to head out of town. So that's part of the reason for the brevity of this one, which I'm making longer by what I'm saying. So, yes, this afternoon rather, I had a visit with a student outdoors, and it's a fairly typical thing that I see out there. Um, a student has taken a narrow passage of the student had taken a narrow passage to work on, something within his proper range, just that much of the landscape, not the whole big thing. And he was painting the picture, but he had painted his dark significantly dark, uh, so much so that I asked him if that was, well, my hope was to come across to him with the idea that that isn't necessarily an appropriate value for there. And then I said, in fact, if you look at this tree right next to you, that isn't just aside from your scene, that dark in that tree next to you is the dark. You're using that as the dark in this scene, but that dark in the scene is comparatively is way lighter. So, can you use, the question really would becomes, can you use stuff that's not in your picture to help you assess the data in your picture? And it's a good question. And I'm going to show you some ways that I've found useful, and usually in the course of teaching, but also just in the course of assessing my own, you say a still life or a landscape or a portrait, to assess, for example, what color or what relatively how chromatic it is. And I think you'll be able to see how that can work. Um, I was painting a portrait a bunch of years ago, and I remember having that experience. There was a window in the background and out onto a landscape, but the data in that window was so minor. So the values were almost non-existent in it. They were so shallow, and they were all way, 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 way up in key. And yet, if you looked through the window, looked at things in the window, you could easily believe that they could be seen better, and you would want to paint them darker. But if you did it, of course, you would lose the glow of light that was what made the window different from the entire interior. So, but that's just common sense relational thinking, right? Um, but let's just look and see if some points come up in the way I think of this. And by the way, before I do this, I'm going to throw this at you just because one of our guys, one of you guys, oh, I'm so sorry, I've forgotten. Who is it that did this? Sent me a very interesting essay on Impressionism by a non-painter who had obviously had connections with painters. Now, I'm going to show you this to show you the sort of stuff we think about, and yet I'm doing it to juxtapose it against what I'm about to tell you. So he says to learn to see color, see these colors, he's talking about Impressionist colors, is a development. In my own case, I may confess, I got my first idea of colored shadows. Whoa, I apologize for that, but I'm not going to stop. From reading one of Herbert Spencer's essays 10 years ago, I then came to see blue and grape color in the shadows on the snow. By turning my head topside down, I came to see that shadows falling upon yellow sand were violet, and the shadows of a vivid sunlight falling on the white of a macadamized street were blue like the shadows on snow. Being so instructed, I came to catch through the corners of my eyes sudden glimpses of a radiant world which vanished as magically as it came. Now, these are just two different ideas about how we consider how we sort of we find ways of seeing color better. Now, you could say that in both cases here, he's not able to see what the thing is, and he isn't using the zoom of his eyes to find it. Standing on your head, of course, and looking out the corners of your eyes. Well, we talk about all those things. We talk about looking hard at the thing you're not looking at and all those sorts of things. This is in a different category. And the whole world of relationships, is, usually you're in a picture. All the data in the picture is one-to-one. This to this, this to this, this to that, the chroma to other chromas, and so on. The values, the darkest dark, lightest light, all those things. We do those things within the frame. But sometimes the unity, the grand impression of the frame isn't understood fully. So, and you can work, for example, we've all seen impressionist painting that's very high keyed. In other words, the darkest darks aren't very dark. We've also seen some, including Monet's, where the darks are nearly black at times. So you can see that we can create ranges and this is both in both cases, sunny days. So you know that we have this range, this ability to work within these ranges, and if the relationships within those ranges are good, that's good. But what I'm going to throw at you now is just a different little discussion. And I hope it's a little bit helpful to you. But, well, let me jump ahead to this one first. This is a landscape that one of you sent to me, and I forget what we were analyzing in it. But I'm going to show you this landscape. Now, here's the section. Let's say the person chose to paint this section of the landscape, thought that was a nice composition. The question is, to assess the value contrasts and all those sorts of things, can he use something outside the frame? And how reasonable is it to use that? In figuring out how dark this note should be, is it reasonable to consult the note out here that might, no, I'm not saying it is in this case, or this one, that might be darker, and wonder about the range, the value range that you're working in? It's just one of those things. It doesn't mean that we can't live within whatever range we choose. We can key our painting any which way we want. But that's information that might be useful. You might say, I'm going to paint this. And maybe that's where tonalism partly comes from. You can paint this light here, but you may never, you can see that light. You may use that light up here, but it may not be this light up here. Or say these down here, even better probably. These might be lighter than that. So you have now a sense of this frame, and you're thinking, oh, that's closer. Those things are a little closer in value than I would have otherwise thought. I wonder if I can manage that range. Do you see what I mean? So looking at data outside that area might actually accomplish something. Now, there are other ways in which I've used it. I'll go back to those first slides in a minute. For example, when a student is trying to assess say he's doing a still life of a table. This is just a photograph from the studio. But he's got this picture right here. He's going to paint this thing. And he wants to know, he needs to know at some point how warm or cool it is, or how orange or whatever. And I'm suggesting to you that what he can do to understand that whatever he's got in that frame better is to glance right over here and look at this section. Frame up, you might say, send his viewfinder over there. And he's going to see, oh, that's relatively speaking a cool picture. Oh, this is a hot orange picture. Oh, you see what I'm saying? You can do the same thing with the values. Your dark is dark. If you're painting in here and you start making things inside here really black, well, you could look outside that area. Say your painting is right here. You can look outside that area down to here and say, there's nothing in that area that's that dark. I wonder if that's wise of me to use a dark like that. In other words, your painting will tend to become inkier than it is in nature, potentially, right? So those sorts of things, it's the same thing if you were painting this section here and you compare it to this section here. You see how much greener this is. Now, these appear to be similar in tonality, but this one is more chromatic as an area. But you want to understand, say you're painting this, you want to understand this area. It's useful to look at this area and see, this is the way I phrase it, and see what it ain't. Okay? Now let's go back a section to the. So these are memory studies I've shown you before online. These are things I do. I'm driving away in a car going down the highway, and I see several notes that really intrigue me. And without driving my car off the road, somehow or other, I managed to memorize a handful of notes in their relationships to each other. And but what this might have been on exactly the same day. Sometimes I do memorize two the same day. But this is the view I was looking at and memorizing. And then I noticed that the rearview mirror, everything in the rearview mirror was this goofy green. And I thought, wow, two whole entirely different paintings depending on which way you're facing. But each one of them informs the other. Now, I'm not saying about nature, that's true, or about mirrors that are definitely going to do that kind of thing anyway. They're going to do something funny to the values and they're going to color it up. You might say rose color it up. They're going to tend to bring it all toward in one direction, like toward yellow. But you really want to understand what a fresh note or what a happy view that is. And you got this one in your other, this jaundiced view down here. It helps you to understand this one better. I wonder if you can see what I'm saying and how that might be a thing. So here's another one. There we go. So this view here was, this is a memory drawing of a memory color study of a tree out my side yard, and then to the side there might have been, I'm not saying there was, over to one side or the other there might have been a view like this, where the sky, once you turn your head, becomes a whole different color. But it helps you to understand the colors you're working with here, to see what they ain't. And I'm putting it that way for you. I'm just throwing this at you, something you might consider. Just consider using the rest of the studio space. You might even begin to see how dark it would have to be if that's, say if this hillside is that value. What does that tell you about, et cetera, et cetera? It doesn't mean these, as I got before, it's very important to say that these things, to know that these things don't have to be keyed. They don't have to be keyed in the same direction. I mean, they can be keyed any value range you want. When you're painting representationally, you really are trying to find that place that would be in some sort of a world, ideally site size, where the color matches color, or color matches color, and the whole effect matches the whole effect. But we can't do it. So whether you like it or not, whether you guys are believers in something else or not, it is an art of relations. But sometimes I see a student setting up a still life, and then he starts laying in the painting, and he's laying it in, and the painting is very dull and boring and stuff. His color notes might be. And I point at something in the other part of the room, or it might be too warm, and I point at something in the other side of the room, and I say, this is, now, do you see what that is? You're painting that color in this picture. That's a different color grouping. So I'm simply saying that sometimes it's easier. Now, if you don't understand that this is, relatively speaking, a purple picture, now, for whatever that's worth, or this one here is a chromatic picture, and in the orange to red family, compared to a green. So if you look down here, this is just my tabletop, the palette top. But if you look down here, this is what we could call a green painting. And paintings do that, right? You notice that. There are yellow paintings, green paintings, blue paintings, and there are all sorts of categories through all the paintings. So this, in the way of classification, is really helpful for you to know what you've got when you see your thing as a pictorial whole, and it helps you to hold the big impression in a nutshell, shall we say. But you can see that this passage up here, this is a much greener, it's a duller version of green, moves all forward in the blue direction. So if these were three different still lifes or three different color schemes, you'd begin to get some clarity about what yours particular one is. As I say again, by way of what it ain't, and you can do that with all sorts of things, but that's just hugely helpful. If you're painting this thing here and you're painting it such and such a darkness, and you want to, you might consider whether or not, is that an inky dark, or and you might find that there's actually a black over here somewhere that's so much darker than that you would consider then, not that is truly with this value or that value, but you could consider then, what would that be if I painted that not so black? And et cetera, et cetera. So, but just the information that comes from other parts of the room might be useful to you. And there are different ways of using other parts of the room. One of the things I've noticed, if you want to see your picture bigger, if you want to get a grasp of the whole picture, Just take in, look, stand back and take in more of the room. Take in a whole bunch more of the room, and all of a sudden the picture will seem smaller. Your whole still life setup will suddenly shrink. Like in this case here, if you're taking in all this space, if you can actually get your mind around that space, you'll suddenly realize that your subject is, it sort of becomes more controllable. So there's psychological benefit to you. It's the same thing with something like this. If you want to know what kind of blue that is, this is just pure relational stuff, but you're still painting just the portrait. Well, look at the blues in the rug. You want to know if this green is in the portrait or other greens are, and you want to know what kind of green it is, look at greens in the rest of the room. You say, oh, that one is definitely yellower than that one. I wonder how that works. It's more chromatic than this one in the other parts of the room. It's the kind of stuff that may inform you in some useful way. So without making any more of it than that, I don't think I have another picture anyway. Without making any more of it than that, I hope you can get your head around the possibility that there is in this room data that may help you to understand something about the central figure, just in the way when you're just sitting there. How dark should it be? How light should it be? Well, look around the room. When you look at a setting like this, say we're painting it from this spot where we're viewing right now from right here, when we're taking this photograph, if that's what we're painting, how dark or how light is that picture? You say, oh, well, what is that as a general tonality? How dark? Well, you'd say, well, look over here. That's way darker. Oh, yeah, that's not as dark. And look over here. This section here might be significantly lighter if that were the portrait right there. Do you see what I mean? So now you're beginning to see this is a general tonality of light, relatively lighter. This is a middle value, and this is a seriously, or some section of this might be a seriously darker painting. But it helps you to get your head around it. If you want to call it the class of painting, it is. It's a classification. You can do that with chroma and other things. If there's a section of the room that's like this is much more chromatic than anything in this painting, this section of the room. So you would say, well, that's this as a painting. Oh, I see, that sort of tempers me a little bit. It helps me to know that it's not a hyperchromatic painting. But that's what you're trying to do. The general impression contains that awareness. You're trying to have that awareness constantly, to be aware of what kind of picture this is taken as a whole, and et cetera. And even the parts of it, yeah. If you want to know, I often say to students, if you want to know how light to make that leg, go up there, put a piece of white paper over there and ask yourself, just set it there. You're not going to use it in the picture, but just set it somewhere facing the window and find out what white with light bouncing off of it, maybe like the kneecap. Find out what the difference is. But that's just borrow, you know what I mean? That's just bringing data into the room. There's so many other ways to do things like that, but it's just because I ran into it today, I thought it might be something just to mention in a very brief video. And I'm going to clear out of here and not say a whole lot more, except thank you for your kindly donations, ladies and gentlemen, today. And I hope the rest of you can continue to subscribe, share, like, comment, and of course, please donate as much as you can to the cause if you're getting some benefit out of it. So, and I said that on behalf of the guy who does all the work. I still have never taken a penny from this. So, all right. I'll see you next week, and have a great painting week.